Hey everyone, and welcome back to Knowledge on Ears. And today we're going to be taking a look at hard drives, CDs, DVDs, Blu-ray discs, and solid-state drives, and all those cool types of storage devices. And we're going to be looking at them practically and how they work. So let's get straight into it. So this right here is our portable DVD reader and writer. And basically what it does is that if you take a DVD disc and you just slide it in from this entrance, then it starts to read and write what's on the disc. But first, what even is a DVD? What are these different disc types? Well, there is a DVD, which stands for a digital versatile disc. There's CDs, which are compact discs, and there's Blu-ray discs. And those are the main types of discs that were used in the past. We don't really use these anymore, which is why this is kind of old. I haven't touched this in a while. But basically, the difference between all of them is they all use different types of lasers or different types of light to actually detect what data is written on these discs. So for CDs, which we're going to talk about more very soon, those use infrared lasers to read the data on the disc, while DVDs use even smaller wavelength lasers, red lasers, and that allows for more data density, so more data to be stored on the disc. And for Blu-ray discs, those use blue-violet lasers, and that allows for even more data, so for even more finer, high-definition storage, right? And yeah, they also have different storage varying capacities, but those are the main differences. This one right here is similar to how a CD and a Blu-ray disc cover would look. Okay, so I plugged it in, so now it's going to start doing some stuff. If I turn the button, it's going to open, and inside we have a DVD already, one of an old DVD. So it's placed on this external enclosure. If I take it out, very hard to do with one hand, but I'm going to place that right there. You can see there's a laser right here, and this laser is what is the red laser that allows you to actually detect what's on this part of the DVD, which carries all of our binary values, all of our ones and zeros, and it carries all the data. So also CD readers and Blu-ray disc readers look very similar to this. And yeah, you can also read and write this DVD. So now we're going to dive into CDs. So right here we have our CD, which is a compact disc. And basically, we already know that when we have it inside of our casing, there's a laser that reads the CD. But how does it read it? What is there to read on this flat, plain, glossy surface? Well, you might not be able to see it, but there's a lot going on here that allows you to read it. So basically, we have different types of indentations in the CD. And there's pits and there's lands. And keep in mind that for this type of CD, which is a non-rewritable CD, so these are CDs that are created once in a factory and you can't change them. So we're only looking at this for those types of CDs, but there's also other types of CDs which are rewritable, and those work differently. But basically there's pits and there's lands. So if this is the surface of the CD, the pit is a part that extrudes outwards a little bit, and the land is like a kind of valley inside of the CD. So when the laser hits a land, it always reflects back. And that tells the laser that there is a 1. That represents a 1 in binary, because we know computers talk in binary, zeros and ones, and that's how they communicate, that's how they read data. So if there's a land, that's a 1. If there's a pit, then the light just kind of scatters and it doesn't reach the laser again. So that represents it's a 0. And that's how CDs work. So now let's actually get into how hard drives work and how SSDs work, because those are the ones that we use in this day-to-day century. So right here, we're taking a look at our hard drive, our HDD. And we have a bunch of platters, silver platters, which are stacked on top of each other. And we also have these actuators that actually read and write data on the platters. So this entire actuator system, the entire part that reads and writes data, is called the head stack assembly. And basically, the tip, which is the transducer, reads and writes the data on the head stack assembly. And we're going to dive more into that very soon. But the entire actuator part is called the head gimbal assembly, and that consists of the slider, which slides nanometers on top of the discs, and the transducer, and all of those parts that actually does the reading and writing. So if you look at the very top, that's the orange part where the actuators are parked inside while they're not moving. That's called the ramp, and it just makes sure nothing scratches the plate, scratches the platter as well, nothing's happening. And then we also have we have the electromagnet at the back, which actually controls the motion of our actuator while it's moving, because it has to move so quickly. And something that's even cooler is that there's so much space on the platters to read and write data. Like, for example, you can fill over 200,000 tracks on 1 inch of this platter. So we already looked at how CDs, DVDs, Blu-ray discs, how they actually read and write data on their discs. Like for CDs, for instance, we have pits and we have lands. We have physical changes on the surface of the disc to read if there are zeros or ones. But on a hard drive, right now we're gonna take a look, we're gonna use this CD, we're gonna act like this is a platter on a hard drive, just for this scenario. So basically, on a hard drive, we don't have any physical changes like pits and lands. Instead, we have this ferromagnetic coating around the hard drive platter, and that allows it to get some magnetic properties. Basically, in a hard drive, the entire reading and writing process all comes down to magnetism. It all comes down to electromagnetism. And what happens is the ferromagnetic coating, and previously we've talked about ferromagnetism in different videos, but ferromagnetism is basically just when a material has magnetic properties and it can become magnetic. So like something like iron would be ferromagnetic. And basically the ferromagnetic coating over the platters allows it to have different magnetic domains. That's when magnetic particles in the ferromagnetic coating clump together and create different groupings. And those groupings are called magnetic domains. And basically a magnetic domain is like one of the domains that can be represented by a 1 or a 0. You can compare it to a pit or a land. It's basically you can have it represent a 1 or represent a 0. And we change that using the transducer. So for the transducer, on the right head, like the head that writes data, that's what I meant, the right head has like this magnetic core with a coil around it, and we pass current through it. And if you recognize that, that is an electromagnet. And basically this electromagnet allows the transducer to have this very strong, large magnetic field. While on the other hand, in the ferromagnetic coating, the small magnetic domains have a much smaller magnetic field. So this comes down to coercivity. Coercivity, I think that's how you pronounce it. But basically coercivity is it's like a property where it represents a stubbornness or resistance of a material to be demagnetized, or the stubbornness of a material to change its magnetic field or alter it. In this case, since in the ferromagnetic coating, there is these magnetic domains that have a much smaller magnetic field compared to the magnetic field of the transducer, the magnetic field of the domain will easily change when the transducer comes close to it. So that's how the entire writing process works. When the transducer hovers over that magnetic domain, it alters the magnetic field of that domain to align with the magnetic field of the transducer. So depending on the magnetic field the transducer has, it aligns the magnetic field of that domain, and that's the most important part. So the transducer changes its magnetic field consistently to either write zeros or ones. So one alignment of the magnetic domain would create a 1, one alignment would create a 0, and that depends on the HDD that you have. So for the writing process, on the other hand, for the reading process, the reading process just is we have the read head coming and determining if it's either an alignment of 1 or an alignment of a 0, and that reads the 1 or a 0 to represent the data on the hard drive platter. So that's how it works. I hope that makes sense. But now we're going to look at solid state drives, which are our modern types of hard drives. So solid state drives are like the hard drives, they're like the type of hard drives we use today in the modern century, and they are so much more compact, they're so much more effective to use. This is a solid state hard drive, and it's so small compared to these CDs, compared to hard drives, and it can carry so much more. And obviously there's different varying amounts of storage capacities, there's different sizes of these solid state drives, but it's really just super easy. You can fit it into whatever you want and you can use it very easily. And instead of having moving parts like hard drives or having any physical changes, it really just allows you to have billions of different like microscopic semiconductor cells, and that's how the reading and writing happens. So let's get into it. It uses something called 3D NAND technology, or NAND technology, and what that does is all of these cells, these semiconductor cells, are stacked on top of each other vertically to save space. So it just allows for a lot of space storage, while in other storage devices, it's like all side by side. Like these pits and LANs are side by side. All of these magnetic domains are side by side. But for solid state drives, those are on top of each other, those semiconductor cells. And what happens, how data is written is by trapping electrons inside of buckets, inside of these semiconductor cell buckets. So in each cell, there is this bucket, which is like isolated by these thin insulating walls. So there's something called quantum tunneling, which is like this principle, pretty complicated, but it's in quantum physics, which is like a phenomenon where electrons can actually tunnel. They can move through these insulating walls. They can move through insulators they can't normally move through. And I'm not going to go into detail with that, but basically these electrons move through these walls into these buckets because of these precise voltages applied to each cell. So when electrons are inside the bucket, then the computer recognizes that as a zero, as a binary zero. When there's no electrons, that's a 1. So that's basically how it works in simple terms. But obviously, as time goes by, these solid state drives, SSDs, are going to get smaller and smaller and even more crazy and cooler. So I'm looking forward to that, and I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for listening. Bye!